So, welcome back everybody. We continue today in chapter 33. We actually began this chapter last week, so this would be the second class on the chapter 33. You can see this past class, which again, the Alter Rebbe takes the energy of chapter 34. Excuse me, we began last week 34. And the Alter Rebbe basically takes the energy of the message of chapter 33 and anchors it into our day-to-day life. Again, as you can see and appreciate this description, perhaps in following, looking into the last class. Again, you could find it on this very website, and the link of Tanya, just put on the link box at Tanya. You see all this class and previous classes. But as I always introduce, for those newcomers, that you can see it on tanyaonline.com, and which is again a website hosted by Kosher Tube. Yet it is solely for this class, which makes it easy to access, easier to access the previous classes. And namely, there you can follow with the text, which again the last week's class is up, posted, and you could look into there, which I say anchored because this is basically the message of the Alter Rebbe, or the way that the Alter Rebbe describes Moshe Rabbeinu's commanding the Jewish people. In other words, Hashem commanding the Jewish people via Moshe Rabbeinu to establish, to erect a Mishkan, because the point of the Mishkan was to take the entire Matan Torah experience and anchor it into, anchor it down. In other words, it should become in a way that the Hashras Hashchina, the Shechina, be able to dwell on a permanent basis. And again, the message of 33 is that sensation of that Hashem Echad, sensation of the knowledge and appreciation and perception, profound perception, and thus appreciation of Hashem Echad, the message of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is by definition a transcendent experience. A person putting things Hashem Echad in the perspective, in the appropriate perspective, it's a sense of it causes him to transcend. This was the ultimate Rebbe's message as well, in that Chavakuk v'tzadik be'emunah yichya. It's like Tchias HaMeisim. He was able to lift himself up. L'mayla mayla tis'al nafshe l'mayla mayla. As the lashon of the Alter Rebbe, his nefesh will ascend maila high and even higher on all this, which would be an obstacle for him to keep Torah mitzvahs. Which is again, it's about a transcendency, an experience of transcendency, even though it ought to reflect on overcoming all the disturbances, the challenges and obstacles we have in Avodas Hashem in order to move on with our Avodas Hashem, with our service to God, with our prayer and our learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and so on and so forth. But yet, the message itself is extraordinary, understandably. And this was the life, as Alter Rebbe explained in the very beginning of the chapter 34. This was the life of the Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, which are our forefathers. And he gives the Moshe Rabbeinu, which was the quintessential Navi, or quintessential Navi, and he says Eilal Kolana, an individual which was completely batal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this Hashem Echad, the way it is described so clearly in the previous chapter, the way it is from the true perspective of Torah, was the norm by these great tzaddikim. Namely, the Alter Rebbe elaborates on Moshe Rabbeinu, the way Shechina medaberes mitoich gerein shel Moshe. He was just a conduit to the godly reality, but not everybody is on this level. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people, after the experience of Matan Torah, which they somewhat experienced the same revelation, or that Hashem Echad was totally manifest, and therefore they lost their composure of every single dibur, of every single one of the commandments. Parcha nishmasam, literally they expired, and Hashem has left them, and Hashem had to revitalize them because they tuned into, or the Hashem Echad, the true message of Hashem Echad was completely revealed and manifest by them, and therefore they could not comprehend that energy, and therefore thus they physically expired, and Hashem had to again revitalize them, revive them, resurrect them. But therefore Moshe Rabbeinu says, this is not it's not being adequately anchored, because again, this once we do experience the Hashem Echad, not necessarily we have the appropriate tools to contain that message and still maintain our composure. So he says, therefore he says, make a mishkan, establish a edifice, a physical edifice, which this will be the edifice of Ashras, Ashchina, for the dwelling place of the divine presence in a permanent level, which we know that was the mishkan. There was different levels of kedusha, but the climactic, the pinnacle was the host, so to say, or the pinnacle experience of Ashras Ashchina was in the Kodesh HaKodashim, as we explained. Again, we brought this Maimed Azal of Mokim Ha'aron Einu Min Amida. Again, you could see the previous class, how it was so obvious and was so apparent in this physical, this level of expression of manifestation, how of the overt presence of the God, the reality of the Shechina. And therefore the Mokim Ha'aron, the Aron was there and did not take place. And again, you could see how he explained, again, this was this simple explanation of this Maimed Azal of Mokim Ha'aron Einu Min Amida. Again, the place of the Aron, it took place, yet it didn't have any ultimately it didn't capture, it didn't have any measurement, despite it was in its own had a particular measurement. Again, you could look at the previous class, which again we explained that Maimed Azal as well. So now, Rahman al-Islam, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Basically, this is where we left off. We're going to maybe repeat from the words of Mishachar Beis HaMikdash. As of today, hopefully, the Beis HaMikdash will be erected speedily, not only in our times, our days, but our very moments. But at this very point, when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, what do the Chachams tell us? The Chazal tell us, Ein le'la Kodesh Baruch Hu Elo Daled Amis Shal Halacha. The Eibishter only has the 4 cubits of halacha, which is the notion of learning Torah. That becomes the host which anchors the Shechina, which hosts the Shechina in a way that the Shechina, the way it is, with all its glory and with all its expression of infinity, the true message of Hashem Echad is anchored in the Torah that we learn once the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. So, what does it tell us individually? And this is the message of the Rebbe. Keep to your shiurim in Torah. Learn a lot of Torah. And if you're a businessman and you can't learn a whole day, there's the obligation, as we know, to learn morning and night. Perek echad shachris, perek echad arvis. Keep to those shiurim. That's the time you host the Shekhinah. That's the time you're doing the job of the Beis HaMikdash, and more so you're doing the job of the Kodesh HaKodashim. The Aron itself, you become that Aron to which ultimately you become the Kodesh HaKodashim, you become the Aron which hosts the Shekhinah. You're learning Torah in the set time that you establish for yourself, again, based on your guide and your mentor. Again, we have to be honest with ourselves. It's an halacha like any halacha in Shulchan Aruch, just like we're careful in Shabbos and Yantif and so on. And then we try to be not only careful, but scrupulously careful. Similarly, when it comes to Limud Torah, it is a mitzvah. We have to essentially learn Torah day and night, but Torah itself tells us that if you have your time to bring in a parnasa, livelihood, inhibits you to learn Torah day and night, you have to establish a time for learning Torah, the morning and night. Perek echad shachris, perek echad arvis. It's a halach and Shulchan Aruch. We should not try to cut corners, because it's a mitzvah like any other mitzvah, and more so with Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. It has a certain virtue even over other mitzvahs. And then again, it's a case by case idea. Everyone goes to their Rav, to their mentor, and shows them their schedule. It's important to go to someone else. I mention this because sometimes, because of our subjectivity, we always feel that we don't have time, and truly there is time in every day to be set aside. And therefore, we have to go to someone who's an objective, show him our schedule, and ask him, like any other shaila and halacha, which we inquire. We ask him, how much does he think, based on this halacha, perek echad shachris, perek echad arvis, morning and night, how much should I learn in the morning, how much should I learn at night? And once there's establishment, a justifiable establishment, how much one should learn and one can learn, one has to stick to those shiurim, because, additional to the mitzvah, or this is part of the mitzvah of the Perek Echad Shachris, Perek Echad Arvis, means to say learning Torah by day and by night, because that's the way, based on this Maimon Azal, that's the way we host the Shekhinah. Meaning to say the Shekhinah is not anchored today, because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, if we do not learn Torah. So we become the Lemdei Torah, we become those who ultimately, like we say, hosting the Shekhinah, meaning to say bringing the Shekhinah down into this realm of reality. So let's go further over here where we're holding Meshachar Beis HaMikdash, which is again about a fifth into the Perek. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakil nibidvari. Alright, Mishacharav. You could see it in the corresponding text in English as well. When the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not have in His world a dwelling place, a place that He would be able to reside. Hu yichudei yizbarech elo arba amis shel halacha. When the Beis HaMikdash was unfortunately destroyed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not have in His world a place, a domain for His residing, for His dwelling, which is again the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Hashem Echad, solely in the 4 cubits of halacha. What is it with halacha? Why is the halacha contained, a container to contain the Shekhinah, the divine presence, similar to the Kedesh Kodashim? Because halacha is Ritzeini Yisbarich. It's Hashem's desire, V'achachmasei, in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's wisdom, Hamelubashim, which are invested by halachas aruchas lefanenu, which these halachas which are laid out for us, which are presented to us in front of us. This is not just some kind of safer book which tells us, gives us basically the guidelines what would contribute to a better life. This is God in full, in His whole essence. This is Hashem's Ratzain. This is the way Hashem desired that a mitzvah should be performed. This is Hashem's desire that the parameters are what describes the Aveda one should stay away from. And as well, Chochmasa, you have the wisdom of Hashem as well in His Torah. The pasuk says, "Ki chochmaschem u'minaschem." It is the wisdom, it is the understanding which is invested in Torah. Because you learn Gemara, for example, there's a lot of chochma there. It's not only the what to do, what not to do, even though all the what to do's and what not to do's are extracted primarily from the Gemara. So you have Ritzaynei, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire, and then you have Chochmasei, Hashem's wisdom. But we know that Hashem's not unlike man, that there is me, my core essence, and then there's my desire and my wisdom, which are separate entities. Not everybody has Chochma, or at least Chochma Gluya, revealed an overt Chochma. Like Rahman al-Islam, someone could live and be and exist, Chas v'Shalom, he could be missing a limb and continue to exist. Similarly, when you go deeper within the soul, Chokhmah is an extremely important and profound faculty which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gifted us, but not everybody has the ability to expand on his this gifted Chokhmah. Meaning to say, not everybody has revealed Chokhmah. You can exist without revealed Chokhmah, as an example. Because by the regular person, him and his wisdom are essentially, him and his wisdom, and his chokhmah, him and his bina, are essentially 2 entities. So if we apply that to God, maybe one would say that Torah does not carry the core essence, the core essential energy of God. Because if by me, my essence and my wisdom and my desire and my understanding are different and separate entities, maybe it's so by God. So who said God's core essence is in the Torah? The Torah apparently is only Hashem's Ratzain, only Hashem's desire, only Hashem's wisdom. But no, to the contrary. And ultimately, to the contrary, as it says, Lashon in Zohar, Hu uritzoynei v'chachmasei echad. When it comes to God, it does not work the way it is by man. Hashem and His desire and His wisdom are essentially one. So if you find that in the Torah, presents to us Hashem's Ratzon, Hashem's desire. The Torah presents to us Hashem's wisdom, and we know that that is ultimately the core essence of Hashem. Hu uritzeinu chachmasei echad. It's one. And therefore, when you have the Torah, and that's why Torah hosts the Shekhinah, because Torah is Hashem's Ratzin, Torah is Hashem's, in other words, Hashem's desire, Torah is Hashem's wisdom, and this is invested in the halachas which are presented and placed in front of us. So this is the meaning why the Hashras Hashkina, the dwelling of the divine presence, exists in the 4 cubits of halacha. Because halacha is the halacha would be the perfect host for the actus, the oneness of Hashem, because halacha is the ratzon of Hashem, is the desire of Hashem, is the wisdom of Hashem, and hu b'chachmasei Hashem, that yichudi, that actus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is one with his ratzon, is one with his chachma. Can you think about a better host to host the Shekhinah than the limud of 4 cubits of the halacha, or Torah in general, particularly halacha, which carries not only the chachma shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the wisdom of Hashem, it carries the ratzon, the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So similar to the mikdash of Kodesh HaKadosh, for that matter, you could right away see the connection. Why was the Torah in the Aharon? Why does the Aharon represent Torah? Because they have that common denominator between the two, that they both are associated, they're both the perfect keli for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the echad actus of Hashem. So therefore, this with Alter Rebbe continues, and therefore, after one ponders and invests his thought in this bittul, in the sense of self-nullification, which comes as a result of that profound perception, understanding, and appreciation of Hashem Echad, which obviously causes our bittul, our self-nullification, because if God is, I'm virtually not. And again, it's not that it's two separate experiences. I will profoundly understand that Hashem Echad, and then I have to be mevatel myself, I have to annul myself. No, it comes together because it's about God, and everything is God, and God is everything. Especially again, we emphasize there, and we elaborated and expanded on this notion. It's not Kel Ha'olam, that the world is a separate entity, and God is in charge of the world, but Kel Olam, Hashem and Olam are essentially one. Meaning to say that Olam is not, the world is not a separate entity, it's a mere extension of God, so it's about God, so I don't exist. Meaning to say I'm part of that godly reality, I'm part of the extension, part of Olam, which is ultimately an extension of God, not a separate entity. So after one ponders and invests his thought in this bittul, in this notion of self-nullification, which comes of that perception and appreciation of Hashem Echad, according to his abilities, so this he pays attention. In other words, he draws to his heart. Literally translated, which means he focuses, and he comes to the conclusion that because my seichel, my intellect, and the source of my soul are too small, are too minute, or rather too small, from tolerating, from containing, from comprehending this Hashem Echad, this experience, this sensational, transcendent experience of Hashem Echad, and to me to maintain my composure, because I cannot, my seichel is too small, is too little, from containing this experience of Hashem Echad, that I should be a merkava or mishkan lichudis baruch, that I myself, similar to the others, to be a merkava, a chariot to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, I suggest everybody, to those who want to get again, have an appreciation, understanding why the Avis of Avraham Yaakov were called and named a merkava, a chariot to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we again expanded on this message, or on this explanation of this lashon, which is the lashon Azar, the Mahavis Heinin HaMerkava, or Moshe Rabbeinu is a merkava, is a chariot to God. Just like a chariot has nothing of themselves, it's just about the rochev, the rider. It doesn't even suggest to go left, to go right, wherever the rider wants to go, that's where it goes. Avraham Yaakov, and so to these great tzaddikim, true great tzaddikim, similar to Avraham Yaakov, or Moshe Rabbeinu, which was again the quintessential merkava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The reason why they're called merkava, because the rochev, which is God, ultimately rides upon them, that they're completely selfless, similar to the chariot, bringing God from point A to point B. Similarly, like the chariot brings men from point A to point B. They brought HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the point that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to get to where the ultimate objective and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted in creating this entire world, to have a Dira Le'izbarach, a dwelling place in this physical world. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, these great tzaddikim bring Hashem to point B, to his objective and his goal, to the maximum fruition. And they have nothing of themselves in the way. Who can say that about themselves, honestly? And this is what he says, my seichel, I could somewhat tap in to that sensation of Hashem Echad, but that should be permanent, that I should be a merkava. I cannot contain this message that it should result of me being a chariot, a merkava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a dwelling place, that I should be a permanent dwelling place for the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be'emes la'amitei, in a true, authentic, genuine fashion. True. Remember, emes is obviously something which is the fundamental in Avodas Hashem. We're not kidding. We cannot kid around and try to camouflage what is Avodas Hashem, what's not Avodas Hashem. It's certainly not just a good shuckle or a good scream in a shul. It's about truth. It's about being a full-fledged container. In other words, a full-fledged merkava, a sense of complete, total nullification. Meaning, a merkava, meaning a chariot with complete selflessness, be'emes lamite, truly, and even this is part of the cheshbon of the one who understands, and again tapped into the notion of Hashem Echad, the way it was explained in the previous chapter, causes him a bittul, but then he comes to a conclusion that I don't have the container to anchor this notion of Hashem Echad, that I should be a merkava mishkan, that I should be a chariot or a dwelling place for Hashem Echad, be'emes lamite, truly, mi'achad les machshava delete fisa maseges be'yizbarach klal klal, because ultimately my thought is it's shallow to be topaz, to grasp and have a total comprehension on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, klal uklal, not at all, shum hasaga, meaning to say in comparison, shum hasaga ba'olam, no true elaborate perception and appreciation, and nothing even close to me'asagas aviz vanavim, the way the Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov perceived the godly reality, perceived God, and our Nevi'im, our prophets perceived God primarily. Moshe Rabbeinu, Avi Kol HaNavim, the quintessential Navi in comparison even to all the Nevi'im, and I don't have anything close in my perception of God in comparison to them. So again, the reason why they were able to maintain that composure despite they had their 2 feet on the ground, as we mentioned last week, it's not that we would expire once we have that complete appreciation and understanding and comprehensive understanding of Hashem Echad. So we said maybe there is a greatness in the individual who expires, similar to the experience of Matan Torah over Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, because they were able to go on, and the Jews, the Am Yisrael, when they heard that it was completely expired, so maybe they're greater because they perceive the message stronger, and therefore with greater energy and greater potency, and therefore they expire, as opposed to Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov were able to go on and continue and with continuation and perpetuation, and there with our Avodas Hashem. But what we explained, if you remember last week, the opposite is true. The reason why we expired is because there's nothing within us. We don't have that container, that grand container, or we don't have that expanded container. We are not kelim for the yichud, the message of Achdus Hashem, to lock itself in or to anchor itself on a permanent basis. And this is the reason why the Eden expired. Quite on the contrary, on one hand they experienced the full sense of Hashem Echad by the time of the Seres HaDibris. On the other hand, their keli was too short-circuited, it was too small, it didn't have the ability to contain this message, and therefore they had expired. time and again at each one of the Aseret HaDibros. Conversely, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, because in Moshe and all the Nevi'im, again, namely Moshe Rabbeinu among the Nevi'im, and he says even in comparison to Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, their container was holy. They had the ability to perceive the deeper levels of the godly reality of God, and therefore when they're exposed to Hashem Echad, they become that perfect match with perfect symmetry and equilibrium between their experience, between them being a keli and the message of Hashem Echad. Because it's from the perspective of their keli, of their utensil, meaning to say of their container, they're in tuned broadly with a profound and elaborate understanding in their Creator and Hashem, and therefore when the core essence of Hashem Echad is revealed, it doesn't completely destroy them, it doesn't cause for the expiration of their body, of their container, it fits with perfect seamlessness, and they connect, and therefore throughout the entire life Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov experienced their Hashem Echad. Therefore, they were Merkava goes together. They stood with a complete self-nullification as a Merkava, as a chariot to the rider. Without, it's not I want to go right and you want to go left. In the very beginning, there's no opinion to the chariot. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov didn't want to do anything other than the Ratzain, the desire of the Rochev, their Creator, which is the rider, which is Hashem. In this case. And so to Moshe Rabbeinu, Shechina medaberes mitoich greina shel Moshe. The Garin of Moshe Rabbeinu is so holy and so lofty, and so part of the godly reality. The Shechina, divine presence, speaks via the Garin, via the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the fact that they can contain themselves, they can maintain rather their composure, is a sign that their composure is on a different level. Their whole being, their keli, is on as gufim, as neshamas begufim. In other words, they themselves were the perfect container because their container was holy and on a different level, and including in their perception of the godly reality, their perception of Hashem, and therefore the yichuda yizbarach clicked perfectly on a permanent basis with them. However, myself, I know exactly what my container is all about. Even the Jewish people of the Matan Torah, in which they were coming after 49 days of elevation, and important elevation, day after day, purifying themselves, refining themselves, preparing themselves for this auspicious day of Matan Torah, where they would come face to face with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Especially in the last 6 days from the Rosh Chodesh, as they made those intense and enormous preparations. So they uplifted themselves and they stood by Matan Torah. Their container was still not that grand for them to maintain, or for them to contain rather, that Yichudei of Hashem, the Achdus of Hashem, the way it is, the message or the energy of Hashem Echad. Therefore they expired after every one of the Aseret HaDibros. How much more so myself, knowing myself and knowing my container, and knowing how distant myself, and as Alter Rebbe says, no comparison to the perception of the container the way it was by Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, or any other Nevi'im, again primarily Moshe Rabbeinu. So what do? On one hand, isn't that the point? Dira b'tachteinim, doesn't it mean that like we said, that is the message, and that is what Hashem wants in Dira b'tachteinim, that it should become real and should become obvious, and it should become, the message should become a palpable message, that Hashem Echad should penetrate and become part of my reality truly, not a matter of screaming Hashem Echad louder than the one next to me, but truly appreciating this message, deeply appreciating this message, and again as Alter Rebbe elaborated on in the previous chapter, and it becomes part of my reality. That's Dira Lois Baruch, that the Loi, the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, finds himself comfortable in this very home, in this very world. If this world becomes a home and an abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so what am I to do if my container is not that great? So what can I do? So the answer is, we follow the pattern of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu also saw this by this being the state of Am Yisrael by Matan Torah. The message, they had to absorb the Hashem Echad. The Hashem Echad has to become completely manifest. This is the message of Matan Torah, the fusion of the spiritual and the physical, meaning to say, the spiritual the way it is, ultimately the core essence, not only of a ha'ara, just a ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the difference of Shem Shakai and Shem Hashem, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, the Matan Torah is about my core essential, my name and my core essence, the Shem Hashem, Shem Ha'etzem, and then even beyond that, the Anochi is explained explained a number of places in Zayir, is even beyond the Hashem. That's why Anechi comes before Hashem Elokecha, the way the Aseret Sedibros begins, because the message is the Bitul Agzeda, the complete opening, the complete fusion, synthesis between the spiritual and the physical. And we speak spiritual, the highest level of the spiritual, which is the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ought to be manifest in this very physical world. That's the message of Matan Torah. And Moshe Rabbeinu felt it. And that was the experience of the Yidden. That's why that was their experience of the Aseres Yidden standing and listening to Aseres HaDibros. But the problem was they expired. Their container could not handle this message. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu felt it. And Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to compromise on the ultimate objective of this physical world being a container or hosting the Hashem Echad. So the Hashem Echad came to a full state of revelation and manifestation by Matan Torah, but the Jewish people expired 10 times. Because they cannot contain this message or this energy of the Hashem Echad, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is exposing himself in his whole, in Bechvei Devatzim, with his whole glory and with his whole essence. You can't compromise. This is the objective. This is what Matan Torah is. This is why Hashem created the entire world. Nisava HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a desire, to have a dwelling place in this very physical world. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu says, we're not going to compromise on the message. We're going to build a Mishkan, which a Mishkan is going to anchor that message of Hashem Echad in its full state and its full expression, in its full state of manifestation and its full state of expression. And full manner of expression, which is again the whole edifice was the container for the Hashem Echad, and namely the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which godliness, the godly reality was totally manifest. Again, as it was expressed physically as Mokim Ha'arim and Yamin Amida, as we explained the week before. And it's not just standing idle. In the center of Am Yisrael, Yidden tapped into it. They brought their karbanos. They joined the experience of the Mishkan. They visited the Mishkan. They took part in the Avodah of the Mishkan. But the Mishkan was there as a permanent, again the Mishkan obviously in comparison to the Beis HaMikdash wasn't permanent, but the Mishkan itself was that permanent edifice which journeyed together with them, which they were able to constantly visit and tap into the energy of the Mishkan. So that became kind of the intermediary, but not intermediary which interferes between God and His world, but this which filters and becomes the conduit to draw the Hashem Echad out of the Mishkan into the hearts and minds of the Jewish people and ultimately to the entire world. So we're able to implement Hashem's plan in creation, and again the objective of Matan Torah, Dira to make a Kodesh Baruch Hu, Dira Loi to the core essence of a Kodesh Baruch Hu becomes a home. This world becomes a home for the core essence of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. But now that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, we ought to follow the exact pattern of Moshe Rabbeinu. This is what the Yid concludes. Ila Zeis. And again, that is through keeping to my shiurim in Limud Torah. And again, as we mentioned before, just like the Aharon was the perfect host for the Yichudis Baruch, for the Ashras Hashchina, the dwelling place of the divine presence, of that enormous energy of Hashem Echad, so too Torah, which is the Ratzon Chachmas Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the desire and the wisdom of Hashem, that is the container which anchors the Hashem Echad, that energy of Hashem Echad, and therefore, and he concludes again this cheshbon. He says, I am not like the Avis, nothing close to the Avis, to the perception of the Avis, or the perception of the Nevi'im, in the godly reality of Lizais, and therefore, as a Mishkan, or Machin L'Shiftai, I will make a Mishkan, a miniature, a minuscule Mishkan, and a dwelling place, a machin, and a domain, an abode, L'Shiftai, for Hashem's the dwelling, for Hashem's residing, which again like a microcosmic type of Mishkan, but yet carries the same message and the same energy of the Mishkan. And how do I do that? My occupation in learning Torah. according to my ability, b'kvis itim, in establishing times by yom u'valayla, by day and by night, kedas hanitno l'chol echad ve'echad, like the dictate or the obligation which is given to every single one, which is presented in the Hilchas Talmud Torah, the Halachos of Talmud Torah, like we said before. Learning Torah is a mitzvah like any other mitzvah, and perhaps even greater. But Talmud Torah K'nei Kulam, we should never be easy on that mitzvah. Yeah, I learned last week. I walked into a shir, learned a little bit Gemara. It's a mitzvah which we have to be careful and scrupulous like any other mitzvah. If I'm not going to buy a lulav which is run down, or an esrog which is cut away, part of its skin, part of its tissue, I have to make sure that I keep the mitzvah of Talmud Torah in the same fashion. And therefore we have a Shulchan Aruch which tells us how to keep the mitzvah. There's certain people who have no worry-free. They don't have any obligation. The parnasa, they have a mitzvah to learn Torah day and night. Obviously, with the exceptions of their eating and drinking, and even then, usually someone learns Torah on a constant basis. When he eats and when he sleeps, he's dreaming Torah, and when he eats, he's thinking Torah. Because in essence, the Torah is the limited Torah, the mitzvah of Torah ought to be around the clock experience. But what if it's totally not practical? And again, even someone within the 24 hours, there's certain things which, as a human being, perhaps perhaps he has to interrupt, but interrupt his learning. But generally, he's learning Torah day and night. What if someone doesn't have the ability to do so? So everything again is in. If you open the halacha in Shulchan Aruch and Talmud Torah, he goes through every single scenario, and he tells you exactly what is your obligation, and you would find your perfect scenario in those halachas, and thus follow the obligation, your particular obligation. If learning Torah, in other words, obligation we all have, but follow the pattern. How much of the day do I have to learn Torah? And again, it's always good to go to someone else, a mentor, because we're all always subjective. And then Rabbi Bahamis kicks in and says, no, you really can't go. They really need you here, and you needed to do this, you need to do that. And then it's all these things are important, and yet we can go through our life. Hours and tens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of hours fall through the fingers. Those hours could have been filled with learning Torah, and again, as part of our obligation to learn Torah. Thus, it's important sometimes to go with the Shulchan Aruch, or usually, particularly when it comes to this mitzvah, because it's not just like you lulav and esrog, you shake the lulav, and the next day you don't have to shake the lulav and esrog again. Perhaps you have to help someone else do it, but you yourself don't have the mitzvah of shaking the lulav and esrog more than once a day. So therefore, it's not particularly a shaila. You really have to ask someone else, because as subjective as you are to yourself, you know that this is a mitzvah that you want to keep, and therefore you will do so. And you don't have to do it to the next day. When it comes to limud Torah, it's not like that. It becomes a bit more sensitive. Our establishing, in other words, it becomes it can become a little more ambiguous of the message of how much we are obligated to learn Torah. Therefore, precisely when it comes to the mitzvah, it's very highly suggestible to go to a mentor and say, look, this is my schedule, and this is the halacha. How much do you think that I have to learn? And when he'll tell you have to learn in 2 hours every morning, so you have to stick to those 2 hours. If he tells you 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night, this is what you have to do. And obviously you can open up your entire schedule, personal schedule, with all your personal obligations, and he will tell you what is important, what is not important, and he will try to help you and assist you, not to make it hard on you. Hashem wanted to bring merit to us, so he increased, not only gave us Torah mitzvahs, he increased our ability to have hands-on and to do more and more mitzvahs. And particularly when it comes to limud Torah, the unity which comes by learning Torah there's no comparison. Even though we have to stop of our learning to do a mitzvah, but you're talking about the virtue of limud Torah, there's no other unity which unites a person or any other entity with God. And for that matter, even more than the neshamas and Gan Eden, we're not going to go over the different explanations that Rebbe pointed out in the earlier chapters, namely the fifth chapter of Tanya, which again you could always easily access these chapters, which the Alter Rebbe uses again these chapters with the primary message of the virtue of limud Torah even over all the other mitzvahs. So if he tells you 2 hours, jump to it. You have the ability to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this unimaginable connection via learning Torah. And additional, there's no question, ask anybody who learns Torah, it's about yanking yourself away from whatever you're doing and going into the Beis HaMedrash and learning or finding the Chavrusa. But once you're sitting with an open Gemara or any other limud, and with a Chavrusa, ein lecha Tanya gadol mizeh. One doesn't have to be a spiritual person per se to experience the beauty of learning Torah. You're there, you can't think of what pushed you, what it takes us so hard to come to something so enjoyable. It doesn't mean that the next day you don't have the next same challenge. The Avraham doesn't stop. The Yetzer Hara doesn't stop. But we have to be wise enough to override his suggestions and do the right thing. And that's why we have a Shulchan Aruch, and we accept, we go on with Kabbalas El, accepting Hashem's yoke, even though Hashem himself will show you and the appreciation you have with any mitzvah, in particular when it comes to the Midat Torah, more so Midat Torah, in a home, or by the Rosh Habayis, the father of the home, or generally a home of Torah, transforms and metamorphoses the entire home. Not only it's spiritually that we know that we have a chelik in Eilam Haba, we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is Kihim Chayenu, not only in the Eilam Haba, but as the Rebbe used to point out in many letters, Kihim Chayenu Beilam Hazeh, and it changes the life of the home physically, materially, in good spirits, and in good environment, and healthy environment, and in the healthy environment. There's constancy in this healthy environment perpetuates throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout an entire life. Precisely, not only through other kima mitzvahs, which is well established, that environment in the home, but there's something special to the learning Torah. But again, that's not the primary reason why we do so. This is the gift. We see the reward of Torah, but it is just like any other mitzvah, which is a mitzvah. We don't know why we shake the lulav and Esther. We know that Hashem told us in the Torah. That's what we do. So similar to when it comes to learning Torah. That says kidas hanitna l'chol echad ve'echad. It's a mitzvah which is given. Again, das literally means the religion, meaning to say the mandate which is given to every single person. Which is again described and laid out so perfectly and so with such precision, goes across all the different scenarios which exist within human schedule and the human occupation, and it tells us how much you have to learn Torah. And again, when we do this, we connect to these halachas objectively. Always again suggestible to go to a mentor and ask him, how much Torah should I learn? And if he tells you it's only a half an hour, that's what's obligated to you to learn Torah. Utilize those 2 hours. Utilize that hour and a half. And if he tells you if it's half an hour or 40 minutes or 20 minutes, that is what is incumbent upon you to learn. We utilize it. First of all, we're keeping the mitzvah of Talmud Torah the way we ought to keep it. But in this context, we become ushbezich nevura. We are hosting. We are doing the same exact job, the same exact objective as the Mishkan. We are anchoring the Hashem Echad down here in this physical realm, within myself, within Olam, within this physical world. Azal is that Azal tells even one Pedic, meaning to say at certain times people are so busy in their work, especially their communal people who are involved in community work and so on and so forth. Again, it's a case-by-case idea, and one has to find objectively his place in these halachas. But it ultimately could even lead to a halacha suggesting a person doing even one pedic, one chapter in the morning and one chapter in the evening. So then, if the halacha dictates, the halacha suggests, that's all he has to learn. That pedic that he learns, he becomes the host of the Shekhinah. He does the job of the Mishkan, and ultimately the Aharon, where the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu resides and feels comfortable, like a host, which makes his hosts not only semi-comfortable and mediocrely comfortable, but maximally comfortable. This is what transpires when a person sits and throws everything, puts everything aside, closes everything off. I once heard from the Rebbe actually that a Yid, when he sits and learns Torah, it has to be this sanctification of the time has to be to such a degree that his phone rings. Not only that he has to contemplate, he has to take the phone, not to take the phone, and then put perhaps the phone away. No, I'm learning Torah. And it has to be similar to the way a person tunes in or relates to the phone ringing on Shabbos. There's not even, the phone rings on Shabbos, not should I take it, shouldn't I take it? Oh, it's Shabbos, I'm not going to take it. It's Shabbos. There is no phone. It happens to be ringing, but there's no attention paid to it. Because it's Shabbos today. And if this is the time that I'm learning Torah, it's my minuscule Shabbos. It's the time that I'm hosting the Shekhinah. This is the time that I am doing the job of the Aharon. The Aharon doesn't take no calls. The Aharon is busy hosting the Shekhinah. The most profound part, the core essence of the Shekhinah. And it doesn't contemplate to do anything else. It is the Aharon, which again becomes the connector. The Shekhinah connects via the Aharon. The Aharon is the host to that Shekhinah, so there is nothing else than hosting the Shekhinah. This is what's transpiring. This is what happens when you when you sit and learn Torah in the time that you are obligated to learn. Again, everyone in a case by case. This is case by case scene over here, a case by case scenario, which constitutes each one of us. Each Yid, how much Torah he has to learn, but at that time that you're learning Torah, it's Shabbos. It's more than Shabbos. You become the Ushpezichin Ligvura, you become the host of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah knocks on your door. Imagine HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'chvei V'atzmi knocks on your door, and then you're able to host the Shekhinah, and you say, Ibishter, one moment, the phone is ringing, or someone else is nudging me, and so on. Now, make no mistake, obviously we're not talking about something, when you're dealing with any urgent matter, we always have to stop when it comes to something emergency, or sometimes when someone is in dire help, a poor person. Sometimes we throw out, we could, as we're learning, if you believe that this is a mitzvah that says, this person is not going to come back, this opportunity is not going to come back, we have to give some stuff or something, but nothing else other than a mitzvah, a mitzvah that cannot be done through other people, which usually that's not what disturbs us, if we're only honest with ourselves and alim dateva. It's more the other side attractions which are petty and irrelevant. And we ourselves with our decision, our nonsensical decision, make them relevant. And sometimes in the middle of a sugya, you're hosting the Shekhinah. You're doing what the Aharon does. You are the Aharon at that time. It is senseless to pay attention to anything else. And uvazeh, and with this, yismach libei v'yogil, his heart will rejoice, and he will elate. He will give praise to Hashem on his chelke, in his share, in his lottery, literally, a lottery that he has the ability, that he wins this great opportunity. Hashem gifts us with this great opportunity that we are able to host the Shekhinah. With joy and gladness of heart, al shezocha liyas ushpezichin ligvura, that we merit, that he merited to be a host to Hashem, which is called Gvura, to God, Pamayim b'chol yom, twice a day, kifi ha'eis v'hapnai shalei, based on his time, and based as an opportunity, kimisas yodei asher hichiv Hashem lei, as the ability, his hand ability, meaning to say, the opportunities, the parnasa, the state of livelihood which Hashem gifted him, or as he says, Asher hirchiv Hashem lei, that Hashem broadened his state of his livelihood, which means Hashem broadened his parnasa, and therefore if Hashem broadened his parnasa, so he has more time, and he could firstly set aside time in order to host the Shekhinah, in order to be strict on set aside time to learn Torah, and to be strict with those times to learn Torah. And again, obviously it depends on what Hashem gives him. Imagine someone has no parnasa at all, and he's selling wood, for example. He's a wood chopper, and he's selling wood, and everybody throws him a few pennies, and he has to bring home $100, an example. So he doesn't have the opportunity to learn Torah. Maybe he still has to learn Torah, but he doesn't have the opportunity to learn so much Torah, as an example, because he accumulates penny after penny, or dime after dime, dollar after dollar, till he reach his quota, until he reaches the amount, rather, how much he has to bring in, let's say on a daily basis, to pay his tuitions or bread and butter on the table. Just a random example. that someone has the Eibush gives him the parnasa. He gives him the parnasa more so in a way of hirchiv Hashem. The Eibush gives him broad parnasa. The Eibush benches a yid with parnasa. So he's only honest with himself. He has to set aside more time to limud Torah, because if I have parnasa and I pay my bills and everything which I'm involved with is more about chava, meaning to say that if I stop, that I take this hour and learn Torah, it's not going to make any effect. It's not going to reflect on the of the needs of my family and my responsibility. So that's to take that hour and learn Torah. And if it's hirchiv Hashem lei, and if you see more bracha in your parnasa, be honest with yourself. You have more time to learn Torah. And did you meet many people? Big businessmen. See him at the other day, someone a huge, a big matzliach, ish matzliach. He has the Eibishter's bracha in parnasa, which is beyond the norm. And he tells me, every day I sit and I learn Torah till 1 o'clock. He has a chavrusel till 1 o'clock. I mean, it's no question that if he's a big businessman, al pi teva, if he invested those hours in business, so not necessarily he would make so much more, because in the end of the day everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the keli, the container to receive HaKadosh Baruch Hu's brachas is only b'chukesei teileichu v'mitzvesei tishmeru, learning Torah and doing Hashem's mitzvahs. That is the container of nosati gishmeichem bitam, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us rain, and also as the pirush gishmeichem from the lashon gashmi. Our physical needs come only when we have the right container. But you think of it in the perspective of Teva, you get involved in more business, but he's honest with himself. He says, I have the time. Not everybody can afford this time. I have enough parnasa and I can give tzedakah and so on and so forth, but I have the time to learn Torah, so why shouldn't I learn Torah every day till 1 o'clock? So again, you have many people, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, people are putting their investment in time in Torah. But even if you don't completely take off a significant chunk of the day, but we have an obligation based on the brachas which Hashem gave us, that we have our necessities, and the necessities even beyond our necessities. Be honest, take time every single day and learn Torah. And if it means they could take 2 hours, take 2 hours. And if your mentor based on these halachas is an hour, shall it be an hour? But be strict and be diligent with that hour morning in the morning, an hour in the evening, on a daily basis, because Talmud Torah is every single day, by yom of alayla, morning and night. And when you do so, primarily you're fulfilling this halacha and Shulchan Aruch, but in this context, you are being the host, the very host to the Shekhinah, similar to the Mishkan, and more so similar to the Kodesh Kodashim, and even the Aharon, which was the perfect host to the Yichudei, to the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Have a good night.